so if you had honor before white people started popping up on the continent, then the only way to restore that honor, you would have to go back to a time when there were no white people on the continent. The original black Indians were here, and there were no white people here. There were no Spaniards, there were no Frenchmen, there were no British. It was just the original black natives. So that caused quite a heated discussion among black intellectuals who considered themselves to be in the post-racial America. And so we then determined that white people did not want to go back to a time before white people got here and started killing up the original black Indians, before white people started instituting the British slave trade and bringing that British slave trade of Negro people to the northern continent of America, before Spaniards started bringing the Spanish slave trade to the northern continent, before the French started bringing the French slave trade of Negro people to the northern part of the northern continent. So you have to remember that the Spanish slave trade, the Spanish slave trade of Negro people hit from the west and the southern west tip of the northern continent. You had the French slave trade of Negro people that was hitting the north and the southern portions, trying to basically, remember, whites have to stay in temperatures where it's cool or near water. And so they hit the north and were coming down, attacking the original black Indians, the original black natives, and were at the Gulf area, the waterfront of the southern part of the northern continent, and were hitting original black natives from the south. But they could only go in so far because of the heat and because of the terrain. And of course, so what they did was they gave the southern water border, the southern ocean, Gulf border, where the water is. They started taking control of that. And of course, you had the British sent their children and grandchildren to the eastern part of the northern continent and started killing up original black natives from the east. And so they were getting hit from all sides, which were just the single enslavements and slave trades were dishonorable enough. But the fact that all of these slave trades were hitting the original black natives at once was a dishonorable act. And the fact that as they took over territory, they started exchanging territory between these white factions and began basically, as each stole a territory, they would bargain with the other white faction and to gain, more, just like a monopoly game, to gain a complete portion. So if somebody owned a piece of, or had conquered a piece of portion in the south, the southern part, you had the French would bargain with them to make an entire territory all French. And so there was just all these dishonorable acts going on. And then, of course, the white factions started fighting each other and over the control of Negro people and Negro land and resources. And so they had dishonor among themselves and each other. And then, of course, once the British mothers and fathers and grandparents started having problems with the British children and grandchildren that were sent here to kill us, the original black people. You had a fight dispute began between the older generation Britons and the younger generation Britons that now call themselves Americans. And so the Civil War began, where the older Britons were coming in from the north and fighting the children and grandchildren that were Britons and had become Americans and colonists in the South. Okay, so dishonor there. And so now you have all of these children and grandchildren talking about freedom and equality and all this great stuff, liberation and revolution and all this stuff that white people needed in order to be free and be able to live free at the same time, enslaving Negro people, which was extremely dishonorable. And so they made up once they were able to beat back their parents and grandparents, beat them back to the northern area of the continent, they basically created all of these documents that now decided exactly how this great land that they've conquered and stolen is going to be run. And so they created an entire Constitution, Declaration of Independence from their oppressive parents and grandparents in Britain. And this document, in its conception, was not only extremely dishonorable, but it was downright insulting, in that at the same time they were doing this document, the ones doing it, and the politicians and the different whatnot, many were slave owners of Negro people. And so the hypocrisy was just incredible. And so you now have a complete institution of slave trading, and the dishonor that occurred in that entire era of physical slave trading was just, countless dishonorable acts. But then you had the parents and grandparents decide, okay, well, we'll come at it a different way, and we'll start using the Negro people in order to financially ruin our children and grandchildren into submission. And so they started getting Negroes to come under mental slavery, meaning we'll get you out of the physical slavery, but you still have to make sure you do what we say, or you will be put back in a different physical slavery, i.e. the prison industrial complex. So the northern parents and grandparents in Britain developed this entire system of enslavement in the prison industrial complexes in order to intimidate and push Negroes to do exactly as they were told, or risk being back in physical slavery of a different type. And so it worked like a charm. Negroes were, didn't want to be back in confinement in prison cells and, chains and shackles, handcuffs, whatnot. Didn't want to lose their family members, for life. And so they did exactly what the northern whites told them to do, from politicians to everyday black people. And so this honor among the parents and grandparents of mentally controlling Negro people is something that whites did on all 7 continents. And, of course, it was now happening on the northern continent. And very dishonorable things going on in the mental enslavement. You had the blacks in the north that were making 1/10 of what whites in the north were making, and they couldn't complain because not only would they lose that job, if you want to call it that, it was more of indentured servitude, but not only would they lose that indentured servitude, whatever benefits might have come along with it, but they were risking being put into that prison industrial complex.